We don't know everything about the new creation awaiting us, about heaven. One of the things we hear in Scripture is that it's filled with music. On the opposite end, it's been the imagination of poets through the centuries that hell, if it's got a soundtrack, is noise. C.S. Lewis had a senior demon write to a younger demon in his fictitious The Screwtape Letters. Noise, the grand dynamism, the audible expression of all that is exultant, ruthless, and virile. We will make the whole universe a noise in the end. This isn't necessarily scriptural. This is just imagination. But if the imagination's correct, modern life sounds a little bit like hell sometimes. And it's not just the airplanes, the vacuum cleaners, and the Sabrina Carpenter songs. It's not just the 24-hour noise of Times Square or Piccadilly Circus. It's the unending YouTube reels, 30 seconds each, that have nothing to do with one another, the 24-hour news cycle that makes a big deal out of everything, the internet, that fountainhead of noise. The poet T.S. Eliot once asked, "Where will the word be heard?" as in the word of God. Where shall the word be found? Where will the word resound? Not here. There is not enough silence. We've been going through the Proverbs, and as we've gone through the Proverbs, I felt personally called by the Holy Spirit towards an action. I want to give a gift to every politician and programmer and social media influencer and pastor. And that gift would just be a large Post-it note. And on that Post-it note, in big black letters, would be written the words of Proverbs 10:19. Sin is not ended in multiplying words, but the prudent hold their tongues. See, the opposite of noise, there's two opposites, really. There's silence or music. There's peaceful quiet, or the organization of sound into melody and harmony and rhythm. And the Proverbs and this image have got me asking myself, am I adding to the noise or making music? With my thoughts, with my actions, with my words. Am I adding to the noise or am I making music? If we haven't met yet, I'm Ricky. I'm one of the pastors here at Summit Drive. And I want to close our series on the Proverbs just by sharing something that's been preaching to me out of this book. An observation, a master category that describes the wise person. And I would say it like this: wisdom shows restraint to live in harmony with God's good order. Wise people show restraint, and they show it in three areas: in emotional displays, in their words, and in their opinions. As we begin, to show my flexibility, a sports analogy. I've got a really good friend, one of my best friends in the world. He's just like this wiry little ginger guy, and he is the smartest, most philosophical person I've ever known. This guy has read David Foster Wallace's Infinite Jest 3 times. This is the 5th longest novel in the English language. He's read it 3 times for fun, and now he's doing his thesis on it. But I love this friend because he shows you how complicated people can be. Because he also loves the UFC. Right? People is complicated. So when he comes over to visit, as he does in the summertime, on Saturday night, 2 skinny, bookish, gentle young lads sit down and watch 2 guys pummel each other for about an hour. I don't totally understand it, but I'm willing to go along for the ride. Now, my friend will wax eloquent on the drama that is behind the UFC, the rags to riches stories of these young men, the way that they punish themselves with these unholy training regimens and scant diets, and they master ancient martial arts. All so sedentary North American men can feel remasculated into an outdated vision of what it means to be macho. It's beautiful, he says. It's beautiful. And there are impressive moments. What impressed me the most as I watched was not how hard they could hit. It wasn't the chess-like strategy of their grappling or their cardiovascular endurance. What's impressive is watching somebody get hit in the body so hard that their whole body ripples with the after effects of it, like a stone ripples a pond. And within a half second, they throw a counter punch. Watching somebody get sweep kicked off their feet, and before they hit the mat, they're in a defensive grappling position. It seems that being tough isn't about how hard you can hit. Being tough is about how hard you can get hit and not lose your cool. Proverbs 12:16 says to us, "Fools show their annoyance at once, but the prudent overlook an insult." Isn't this what we see on display in Jesus, who hangs there on that cross and says, "Father, forgive them. They don't know what they're doing." It's not just being tough, being wise, not just in the UFC, but in following the way of Jesus, seems to be about how hard you can get hit and not lose your cool. The second half of this proverb, a more wooden translation, would be, "But the shrewd man conceals his disgrace." We talked about shrewdness a little bit when we started the Proverbs. It's a word that's usually negative in the Bible, meaning kind of like cunningly deceptive. But the Proverbs and then later Jesus, who says we should be shrewd as snakes, grabs this word and makes it positive. Prudent is an all right translation because a prudent person is someone who can think ahead, who can make plans, who has goals and a vision for the future. So a shrewd person is somebody, essentially the best definition I found, a shrewd person is somebody who gets things done, who accomplishes what they want to accomplish in the world. And it's pretty hard to accomplish what we want when we're losing our temper, isn't it? It's pretty hard to accomplish what we want when we're losing our temper. Now, Proverbs isn't saying, like, accept abuse from people or something like that. It's not thinking that we're not going to address when people step out of line or injustice happens. There are Proverbs that say we should deal with it. What Proverbs seems to assume is that the best way to deal with this is when we're being cool-headed. Proverbs 17:27 plays on this theme. It says, "The one who has knowledge uses words with restraint, and whoever has understanding is even-tempered." That word for even-tempered in Hebrew is actually cool of spirit. Not like Ferris Bueller or Billie Eilish cool, but like relaxed, calm. Right? Fools blow a lot of hot air. Wise people are like cool, refreshing autumn breezes. There's this super nerdy military epic fantasy. Yes, that is a subgenre of fantasy that I read a while ago. And in it, these soldiers are following different leaders throughout their careers, and they're kind of having this half-hearted joking argument about whether it's better to be hot iron or cold iron. They're two personality types. Hot iron are brash, abrasive, passionate people who make quick decisions. They often win many battles, right? Because they run in without thinking and they surprise the enemy. Cold iron is cool, calm, calculating, willing to lose battles to win the war. They observe that 4 times out of 5, cold iron wins. Hence the other proverb, "Better a patient person than a warrior, one with self-control than one who takes a city." Patience is part of what we're talking about. And again, as always, Jesus is our wisdom. We see this on display in Jesus. Jesus has abuse after abuse hurled at him. Because the reality is, we've got abuse after abuse hurled at us too, right? You know, if being wise, being patient is getting hit and not losing your cool, you're all getting hit every day, right? You're just heading out the door and your spouse says something that just rubs you the wrong way. They don't mean it, but it frustrates you. Or your boss emails you some criticism and just happens to accidentally CC the whole office on it. Or your 3-year-old reveals to you the seething depths of their hatred for you because you won't let them have a cookie. These things hurt. So what do you think Jesus felt like when people said he was doing things in the power of Satan, when they criticized him, when they said he was nothing more than a carpenter's son, and they weren't even sure who his dad was. They joked at him. But Jesus was able to keep his cool, and I think he reveals why in John chapter 5. After the Jewish leaders start to ratchet up their persecution, in John 5, he goes on this whole speech. We're just going to take a couple snippets, starting at verse 19, where Jesus says to the crowd, "Very truly I tell you, the Son can do nothing by himself. He can do only what he sees his Father doing, because whatever the Father does, the Son does also. For the Father loves the Son and shows him all he does. Yes, and he will show him even greater works than these, so you will be amazed." And then in verse 30, "By myself I can do nothing. I judge only as I hear, and my judgment is just, for I seek not to please myself, but the one who sent me." Jesus, breaking it down, he's just like, I don't care what you all think because my daddy loves me. That's it. That's the root of it for him. The only opinion of me that matters is my Father's. The only actions I need to engage in are the ones that my Father shows me. Because when we're talking about patience, when we're talking about losing our cool, what we're talking about is defensiveness in like modern psychological terms. Defensiveness is when you get hit and your ego, that little voice inside of you that makes everything in the world about you, takes it personally. And what do? You start to build up a wall, you build up defenses, you like man the ramparts with archers and start shooting back. Defensiveness. Which leads me to another observation of Jesus's, which is just like one of the wisest things anybody's ever said, which is just like typical Jesus. Matthew 6:45. "A good man brings good things out of the good stored up in his heart, and an evil man brings forth evil things out of the evil stored up in his heart. For the mouth speaks what the heart is full of." Or as the old King James translates it, "Out of the abundance of the heart, the mouth speaks." And it's not just like evil in terms of sin, but out of the hurt stored up in someone's heart, they bring forth hurt. Right? The Jesus-y thing to do when we notice ourselves getting frustrated and irritated, losing our cool whenever we get hit in the tiniest way. The Jesus-y question to ask is, what's going on in my heart? Because emotions aren't bad, right? Emotional restraint doesn't mean just becoming like a Jedi or something, right? Emotions are a good gift from God. If you're leaking frustration and irritation and defensiveness, that's your body, that's your heart trying to tell you something. Listen. And what would it look like to lift that heart to the Father and to ask him, hey, help me understand what's going on. Help me understand how I'm hurt. What would it look like to lift that heart to close friends, to those closest to you? Because part of this, it's wise to conceal our feelings in some places, but it's not wise to conceal them everywhere. So wisdom lives in harmony with God's good order by showing restraint in these just kind of outbursts, these emotional displays. A wise person can get hit and keep their cool. As you can see, this is a tall order, right? Becoming patient isn't just a matter of just like sitting and focusing on patience. We got to deal with stuff that's going on inside of us. But there is a hack. I know, I promised that there wouldn't be life hacks in Proverbs, but there is one here. If you can't actually feel patient, you can look patient. And to do this, you need to practice an ancient Jewish secret, a technique that was mastered somewhere out in the desert around Sinai, a secret power hidden within all of us. Would you like to know what it is? When the tension is thick, when every word counts and you don't know what to say, the scribes, the sages, the mystics, they encourage us to shut up. It's like, how do they come up with this stuff? It's brilliant. Sin is not ended in multiplying words, but the prudent, the shrewd, hold their tongues. Even a fool is thought wise if they keep silent, and discerning if they hold their tongues. There's this guy named Jefferson Fisher who does a lot of work writing and online, helping people work through tense interpersonal situations. And silence is one of the things he recommends, I think, building on this tradition we see And I've tried it a few times, and it's a lot more gangster than it sounds. Even when people try to offend you or bully you. Say you're young and somebody says something really mean to you at school. What this guy says and what the Bible I think is teaching is just look at them and stare at them quietly for 10 seconds. Because when you do that, you're giving them an opportunity to reflect. And generally, they're going to have to think about the words that they just said. And often, when I've done this, people will apologize. They're like, oh, that's dumb. I shouldn't have said that way. And if they did want to hurt me, they'll just keep talking in circles, but the power's gone because they didn't get the reaction they expected. Right? The wise have a preference for silence when they don't know what to say and when things are really tense. Now, of course, the wise were also told later in Proverbs they have an answer for things. They give advice, right? They sit in the town square and make judgments. But there's a standard for when we do speak if we want to be wise, and we see it in Proverbs 15, verse 28. The heart of the righteous weighs its answers, but the mouth of the wicked gushes evil. And I've got it in the NASB, which is a little more wooden on the screen. The heart of the righteous ponders how to answer, but the mouth of the wicked pours out, or literally gushes forth, or bubbles, evil things. That word ponders in Hebrew is the word haggah, which is often translated meditate, as in I meditate on your law, Lord. It's an onomatopoeia. An onomatopoeia is a word that sounds like what it describes, like the word moist. The closer English word would be the word murmur. Because ancient people, when they meditated on something, they didn't sit cross-legged with humming or something like that, right? They read the scriptures, but they read them out loud under their breath. And if you're Hebrew, that sounds like right? Hence, haggah. The image I think it gives us is just walking around and talking to yourself, muttering under your breath what you're thinking about you should say, which reminds me of my favorite moment in the Fellowship of the Ring. Gandalf, all hot and bothered, and he's about to abandon Frodo and the other hobbits, and Frodo asks, "Where are you going, Gandalf?" And he says, "To talk to the only person who's got any sense left." "Who's that, Gandalf?" "Myself, Bilbo Baggins." Or Frodo Baggins or Mr. Baggins, whichever Baggins it is. Permission to talk to yourself, given to you by the Proverbs. Some of the best conversations you're ever going to have. But the standard that it's laying out for us is that when words really count, we need to think about what we are going to say. We need to think about why we're saying it. We need to think about what we want to communicate. We need to think about what the other person might say. Why? Because words in the scriptural tradition are powerful. They're not just descriptive, they are prescriptive. God set the world whirling with words. A few well-placed words can save a relationship. They can save a city. They can save a country. A few ill-placed words can have the opposite effect. So we read in Proverbs 18:20, "From the fruit of their mouth a person's stomach is filled, and with the harvest of their lips they are satisfied." Our destinies are to some part determined by the way that we use our words. So wouldn't it be better to think about it a little bit? To take a break, to walk away, to calm down, to write it down, to practice the conversation. And again, this is what we see on display in Jesus. Jesus' words are one of the greatest treasures in history. They have been studied and pondered for over 2,000 years, and I'm sure they've got 2,000, a millennia more in them. He thought deeply about what he would say. And yeah, some of you are thinking about the anger thing. It's like, hey, whoa, Jesus got mad sometimes. Yeah, he did, absolutely. But his anger seems to have this quality of being premeditated, like he thought through what he was going to do and what it would mean. Nowhere do we see it more than in the woes to the Pharisees. So Jesus has been persecuted by the Pharisees for 3 years. Finally, he gets to their home court, to the temple. He gets to the temple steps, and he engages in the greatest rap battle in history. He gives them 7 woes. I would encourage you, they're Matthew 23, go read them this week. They are so carefully constructed. They pull together Scripture and Jewish tradition and everything that's wrong with the Pharisees' system. They are brilliant. They are clearly meditated on, murmured over, thought through, prayed through. Because wise people understand that words matter. So they know when to shut up, and they know when to take space and think about what they're going to say. Finally, opinion restraint. The moment you've all been waiting for. Proverbs 25, verses 2 and 3. It is the glory of God to conceal a matter. To search out a matter is the glory of kings. As the heavens are high and the earth is deep, so the hearts of kings are unsearchable. In 2016, I was in seminary. I was landscaping a few days a week to pay for that and to survive. And leaf blowing, hedge trimming, and we were allowed to have headphones in under like our ear protection. And so I listened to the news every day for that season just to try it out. It's not my favorite, but that's beside the point. This was during the Clinton versus Trump election. And I listened to a few different news broadcasters. CNN and Fox was very loud. So I went and found myself in the stoic British for a little while with the BBC, where they would explain in dulcet tones just exactly what candidate Clinton said and exactly what candidate Trump said, and just leave you to form your own opinion about it. And one day while they were doing this, the tone switched suddenly as they started to talk about Queen Elizabeth. Because dear, sweet, 92-year-old Queen Elizabeth was overheard whispering at a party saying, "Did you know such and such a country is quite corrupt?" Let it be known, well-established fact, this country struggles with corruption, has for forever. She got lambasted by the BBC for how inappropriate these comments were. Because royalty, they've got a different standard. See, this proverb's assuming at least two things about royalty. One, that kings and queens are going to deal in the truth. That it is their glory to search out what is true, particularly in matters of justice and running the state. Most scholars will say that's the assumed context. The second thing, that their own hearts, their own plans, their own intentions, what they think personally is somehow hidden from many of the people who follow them. Taken together, I think one of the standards of this proverb is that royalty doesn't deal in opinions. Royalty doesn't get to deal in opinions. Why not? Well, I've served under dozens of leaders in my time on earth. I've worked at summer camps since I was like 12 years old, worked in various ministries as a volunteer, as a pastor in a few different churches. I've seen good leaders, I've seen bad ones. One of the things that separates those two the most, there's been some big moral failings, some other issues, and those are bad, but they tend to kind of reveal something that's going on, and it gives people a chance to heal. But one of the insidious things that can creep in is when a senior leader in particular overshares their opinion. When they casually let slide which worship leader is their favorite, or if they didn't like the worship leader that led this week. Or when everybody's sitting to get feedback on something and they're talking about how things didn't feel right. Or they hop on to Facebook or Instagram and write a diatribe about their opinion about the most contentious issue in the world, replete with bad grammar. These things erode trust and create a cloud of confusion. Because a leader's job is to judge to some extent, to say yes and no, this is good, this is bad. And if the only thing we've got to go on is their opinion, opinions shift, opinions don't make sense, we can't hold ourselves to the same standard. It hurts us. And before you think you're off the hook and be like, well, sucks to suck, Ricky and Dave, enjoy leading. According to the scriptures, we are all heirs of creation. We're the ones who will inherit the earth. Peter calls us a royal priesthood. If you have Jesus as your Lord, you're a child of God. If you're a child of God, you're royalty. And royalty, they've got a different standard. Now, that can sound terrifying, because you're like, whoa, I got to get out there and get like a really like detailed, nuanced opinion about every big thing going on in the world right now then. No, because blessedly, we're called to rule and reign alongside God. When we talked about prayer a few months ago, one of the images I gave you was this idea of being a cabinet minister in God's good government. That it's your job to be given an area of authority and to report on it to the Father. And he'll tell you what's yours and what's not yours, what he's taking care of and what's for you to take care of. When we've been sharing in our staff meetings about our messages, one of the things we did one week is we just shared some of the best pieces of advice or wisdom we ever got from somebody. And Pastor Trish shared something one of her friends said once, which was, don't own what you can't control. As in, don't put most of your focus on the things that you have no power over the things that you can't do anything about. To put this in the context of our faith, I would say don't own what God hasn't given you. Because one of the questions I think we should ask ourselves is, where has God given me authority? Where has God given me dominion? First, of course, over yourself. That's where you have the most dominion, your own body, then your household, then your neighborhood, your city, your country. And I think often we, in our kind of like media-soaked, interconnected age, we like jump outside of that circle to the world right away and start blasting each other on Facebook about like international trade or something. But the problem is you can have a detailed and nuanced opinion about a conflict halfway across the world and not have a detailed and nuanced opinion by the person you're sleeping next to every night. You can have a detailed and nuanced opinion about the politics of another nation and not understand the politics of what's going on inside your own family. You can try to save the world and do nothing in your neighborhood. And there's something that feels inherently twisted about that, right? Jesus lays out that standard. If you're faithful with a little, you'll be given more. And some of you are called to engage. In this congregation, we have many people who are called to engage, who are called to post, who are called to work for the good of our nation and our world, and you've got the skill and the time to develop a good opinion and to share it and to do it with nuance. But I think some of us, we're just stuck trying to own things that God has never given us. And the result is usually pain and confusion. And then in the things that God has given us, we're not exercising the standard of royalty, right? You know, sometimes we need to like hide our hearts for a little bit, think it through before we respond. We need to learn to distinguish between opinion and the truth in how we share. Because wise people exercise opinion restraint to live in order, in harmony with God's good order. So this might feel a little bit like a weird place to end in the Proverbs. And in the Proverbs in general, for some of us, might have been like, what's up with this? Like, what's with this book? Like, this isn't very spiritual or Jesus-y, right? This just feels like just a bunch of advice. The Stoic philosophers had this image that I think relates to the Proverbs very well. They believed that everything had an order to it, a logic, a word. And you were at your best if you lived according to that. And they understood that raised a question, right? If there's like a plan for everything, if nature's using everything to make us better, or providence, then do we really have free will? And they'd say, yeah, you've got free will, totally. You've got free will just like a dog chained to a moving wagon has free will. You can try to go the other way. It's just going to hurt. And Proverbs paints a similar picture to some extent. It says, look, God has ordered the cosmos. He has ordered creation. There is a grain. You would do well to live along it. God is singing a song throughout creation, and you want to learn to keep in tune, to be in harmony with God's good order. And I always think of jazz the most when I think about this and wise decisions. Because jazz is this place where you get to express individuality. Some of you might not know, most of what you hear in jazz, they're solos, they're improvised, they're coming up on the spot. That doesn't mean they're not thought through. That doesn't mean there hasn't been practice. That doesn't mean that there's not tons of theory that goes into that. I played a little bit, not very well, but I was in jazz combos all throughout university. And at one point, I invited my guitar teacher to come and hear me play. And afterwards, I sat with him a week later at my lesson, and I was like, so, how'd I do? He thought for a second. And he said, Ricky, you just need to go to just like a jam at a pub every night and just like puke out all of those bad notes so that when it comes time to perform, you can really think about what you're playing. Tell me what you really think. No, I could take it. But it reminds me of some of the best advice I've heard on music and life from jazz pianist Thelonious Monk. He said, you got to dig it to dig it, you dig. Some music is just imagined. What you don't play can be more important than what you do play. What you don't say can be more important than what you do say. What you don't do can be more important than what you do. See, there's a relationship, and the worship team can come up now. There's a relationship between music and silence. The best music comes from silence. The best music breathes. It comes from an intuitive but deeply considered place. And again, God has been weaving this song. There's that beautiful image in the Chronicles of Narnia where Aslan sings creation. Right? God has been weaving this beautiful, life-giving, flourishing song. And he says, you've got a part to play. It's your moment, you're on the stage. What are you going to do? And sometimes to be wise, to live in harmony with the good order of that song, we need to just like calm down, restrain ourselves, take a beat, take a breath, give a little silence in order to be just as life-giving and creative and as beautiful as the song that God is weaving. And it's my prayer that he would weave that beautiful song out of each of us.